During a quiet night shift, as a storm hammered the small-town police station, a veteran officer heard a strange, desperate scratching at the door. It wasn't a human or a stray dog, but a young bobcat kitten, battered, bloodied, and limping, appeared at the glass doors. Against every rule, he carried it inside. Wild predators don't belong in police stations, but the look in the creature's pale eyes wasn't wild. It was a desperate plea for help. In that moment, he had to make a choice. Follow the rules he'd sworn to uphold or listen to an instinct that told him to save this one small life. What made this wild kitten knock on the door? And what Morrison did next would risk his career and turn an ordinary night into a story the town would whisper for years to come. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The October storm had been building since noon, one of those Pacific Northwest tempests that rolls in from the coast and settles over the Cascade foothills like it means to stay forever. In the small town of Cedar Ridge, Washington, population 8,400 on a good day, the rain hammered down with the kind of determination that made folks pull their curtains tight and thank the Lord for solid roofs. Officer Daniel Morrison sat alone in the Cedar Ridge police station, a squat brick building that had weathered 43 years of Pacific storms without complaint. At 52, Daniel had seen his share of quiet night shifts, but he preferred them to the alternative. His thick fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, filling out yet another report about Mrs. Henderson's suspicious neighbor who had the audacity to water his lawn at odd hours. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, mixing with the rain's percussion against the windows. The station was empty except for him. Budget cuts had eliminated the second night shift officer 2 years back. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he barely noticed. 28 years on the force had taught him that paperwork, like death and taxes, was inevitable. Then came the scratching. At first, Daniel dismissed it as a branch scraping against the door. The old maple out front had been dropping limbs all week, but the sound persisted, rhythmic and deliberate. He pushed back from his desk, his knees protesting with the familiar ache that came with age and too many years of patrol duty. The lobby beyond his office door was dark, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the streetlight filtering through rain-streaked windows. He flipped on the lights and approached the main entrance, peering through the reinforced glass. Nothing. Just rain bouncing off the concrete steps. The scratching came again, lower this time, right at the base of the door. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his service weapon, not to draw it, just to feel its reassuring presence. In nearly 3 decades of law enforcement, he'd learned to trust his instincts, and right now, something felt off. He punched in the door code and pushed it open, letting in a gust of cold, wet air. What he saw made him forget every protocol in the book. A bobcat kitten, no more than 3 months old by the look of it, huddled against the doorframe. Its tawny fur was plastered flat against its small body, dark with rain and mud. Blood seeped from its right front paw, mixing with the puddles on the concrete. But it was the eyes that stopped Daniel cold. Pale green, almost luminescent in the station's exterior lighting, and filled with something he'd never expected to see in a wild animal: trust. The kitten lifted its head, opened its mouth in what might have been a mew, but came out as barely a whisper, and then collapsed. Daniel stood frozen for a heartbeat. Every regulation, every training seminar on wildlife encounters, every liability concern screamed at him to step back, close the door, and call animal control. Bobcats were federally protected. They were wild predators, not pets. They carried diseases. They had claws and teeth designed for killing. And this one, injured, desperate, possibly rabid, was exactly the kind of situation that ended with someone getting fired, sued, or worse. But Daniel Morrison had not become a cop to follow every rule to the letter. He'd become a cop because 30 years ago, someone had given him a second chance when he'd needed it most, and he'd spent his career trying to pay that forward. He bent down slowly, noting how the kitten's eyes tracked his movement but showed no aggression. Its breathing was labored, ribs visible even through the matted fur. How long had it been out here? Hours, days. "Easy there, little one," Daniel murmured, using the same tone he'd used with his daughters when they were small and scared of thunderstorms. "Let's get you inside." He scooped up the kitten. It weighed almost nothing, maybe 5 pounds soaking wet, and it didn't resist. Its body was fever hot despite the cold rain, and he could feel its heart racing against his palm. As he carried it inside, a small part of his mind noted the absurdity. Here he was, a graying police officer with a bad knee and high cholesterol, cradling a wild bobcat like it was a house cat. The station's break room became an impromptu emergency ward. Daniel grabbed a stack of old towels from the supply closet, the ones they used for evidence collection that had seen better days. He laid them on the floor near the radiator and gently placed the kitten down. It tried to stand but collapsed immediately, that injured paw unable to bear weight. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Daniel could better assess the damage. The kitten was male, severely underweight, and that paw, it looked like it had been caught in something. A trap, maybe, or tangled in wire. The wound was infected, swollen and hot to the touch. Without treatment, the kitten wouldn't last another day. Daniel had some basic first aid training. You didn't last long as a small-town cop without learning to patch people up. But this was beyond him. He needed help, and he needed it now. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Doctor Sarah Martinez, the local veterinarian who'd treated his old German shepherd, Duke, through his final years. "Sarah? It's Dan Morrison. I know it's late, but I need your help. I've got an injured bobcat kitten at the station." There was a pause. "A bobcat? Dan, you know you need to call Fish and Wildlife." "He'll be dead by morning if I do that, Sarah. Please." Another pause, longer this time. Then a sigh. "Give me 20 minutes." While he waited, Daniel did what he could. He found an old cardboard box and lined it with more towels, creating a makeshift den. He filled a shallow bowl with water and placed it near the kitten, who lifted his head enough to lap at it weakly. The kitten's eyes never left Daniel's face, tracking his every movement with that unsettling intelligence that wild cats possessed. "What happened to you, buddy?" Daniel asked softly, kneeling beside the box. "Where's your mama?" As if in response, the kitten reached out with his good paw and placed it on Daniel's hand. The gesture was so deliberately human-like that it made Daniel's chest tighten. He'd seen a lot in his years on the force. Domestic violence, child abuse, fatal accidents. But something about this small, trusting creature fighting for its life hit him in a way he hadn't expected. Sarah arrived in 18 minutes, dressed in pajama pants and a raincoat, carrying her emergency kit. She was a small woman in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent years dealing with both difficult animals and more difficult owners. "Jesus, Dan," she said, taking in the scene. "You know this is completely illegal, right?" "So is letting him die," Daniel replied. Sarah knelt beside the kitten, her hands gentle but efficient as she examined him. Severely dehydrated, malnourished, and this paw looks like a snare injury. Maybe 2-3 days old. He's septic. She looked up at Daniel. "Even if I treat him, his chances aren't good. And if he survives, he can't stay here. You know that." "I know," Daniel said, though he wasn't sure he did. Sarah worked for an hour, cleaning the wound, administering antibiotics, starting an IV for fluids. The kitten barely moved through it all, too weak to protest. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and looked at Daniel. "I've done what I can. The next 24 hours will tell us if he's going to make it. He needs constant monitoring, warmth, and small frequent feedings if he can keep them down." She paused. "I should report this, but you won't." "No," she admitted. "But Dan, even if he survives, you can't keep a bobcat. It's not just illegal, it's dangerous. They're not pets. When he gets stronger, those instincts will kick in. He could seriously hurt someone." Daniel looked at the kitten, now sleeping fitfully in the box, IV line taped to his tiny leg. "I'll figure something out." Sarah left him with antibiotics, syringes for feeding, and a look that said she thought he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. The next 3 days blurred together. Daniel barely left the station, catching cat naps in his office chair between checking on the kitten. He'd started calling him Scout, after his old Army unit's motto, "Scouts out." He fed him every 2 hours, a special formula Sarah had provided, delivered through a syringe since Scout was too weak to eat solid food. He changed bedding, monitored the IV, administered medications. On the second night, Scout's fever broke. On the third morning, he managed to stand on 3 legs, favoring the injured paw but bearing weight on it for the first time. By the afternoon, he was exploring the break room, sniffing at cabinets and chairs with the curiosity of any young cat. Word got out, as word always does in small towns. First, it was just the day shift officers, sworn to secrecy but unable to resist peeking in at Cedar Ridge PD's unusual guest. Then the dispatcher, Martha, who'd worked there for 35 years and had seen everything, brought in a can of cat food, just in case it helps. Even the chief, Robert Thompson, stopped by, shaking his head but not ordering Daniel to call animal control. "You've got 1 week to figure this out, Morrison," the chief said, watching Scout play with the tennis ball someone had brought in. "After that, I never saw anything." Daniel knew he was living on borrowed time. Scout was recovering remarkably fast, his wild nature reasserting itself with every passing hour. The break room was too small for an increasingly active bobcat kitten. More concerning was Scout's attachment to him. The kitten followed Daniel everywhere, crying when he left the room, settling only when Daniel was in sight. He'd read enough about wildlife rehabilitation. Sarah had left him some articles, to know this was dangerous. Habituation to humans was a death sentence for wild animals. They lost their fear, approached people who might not be as tolerant, and ended up shot or euthanized. But Scout had already crossed that line. The question was, what now? The answer came from an unexpected source. Martha's niece, Rebecca, worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center about 2 hours north, near the Canadian border. The Cascade Wildlife Sanctuary specialized in large predators and had a bobcat rehabilitation program. More importantly, they had experience with human-habituated animals, maintaining a separate facility for cats that couldn't be released, but could serve as education ambassadors. Daniel made the call on Scout's 7th day at the station. Rebecca drove down herself to assess the situation. She was younger than Daniel had expected, maybe 30, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from working with dangerous animals daily. "He's in remarkable shape considering," she said, watching Scout wrestle with a rope toy. "That paw healed faster than I would have expected. Good care." She gave Daniel an approving look. "But you know he can't stay." "I know," Daniel said, and this time he meant it. "We can take him. He'll go through rehabilitation, learn to hunt, be with other bobcats. If he can be rewilded, we'll release him. If not..." She shrugged. "We have a good life for ambassador animals. Educational programs, proper enclosures, expert care. It's not the wild, but it's not a cage either." They arranged the transfer for the next morning. That night, Daniel sat on the break room floor with Scout curled in his lap. All 15 pounds of him now, gaining weight rapidly with proper nutrition. The kitten purred, a sound Daniel hadn't even known bobcats could make, and kneaded his paws against Daniel's leg. "You're going to be okay, buddy," Daniel said, scratching behind Scout's tufted ears. "You're going to have a good life. Better than if you'd stayed wild, maybe. Definitely better than dying in the rain." Scout looked up at him with those green eyes and slow blinked. A sign of trust and affection in cats, wild or domestic. The transport cage sat ready by the door, lined with familiar towels from the station. Rebecca had brought it the night before, wanting Scout to get used to it. But when morning came, Scout wanted nothing to do with it. He sensed something was changing, and he pressed against Daniel's legs, crying in a way that sounded almost human. "It's okay," Daniel said, though his throat was tight. "This is what's best for you." He picked Scout up, still so small despite his growth, and placed him gently in the cage. Scout immediately tried to push back out, crying louder, reaching through the bars with his paws. Daniel had to turn away. "He'll be okay," Rebecca said softly. "The first few days are hard, but they adjust. He's young. He'll bond with the other bobcats." Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He watched Rebecca load the cage into her specialized van, Scout's cries audible even through the closed doors. Then they were gone, and the station felt impossibly empty. The break room looked like nothing had happened. Someone had already disposed of the makeshift bedding, cleaned the food bowls, erased any evidence of their unusual guest. Daniel sat at his desk and tried to focus on paperwork, but the words blurred. 3 weeks passed. Daniel threw himself into work, taking extra shifts, anything to keep busy. The other officers stopped mentioning Scout after the first few days, sensing it was a sore subject. Life returned to normal, or at least its appearance did. Then Rebecca called. "I don't usually do this," she said, "but I thought you should know. Scout's doing well, really well. He's gained another 5 pounds and that paw healed perfectly. No limp at all." "That's good," Daniel managed. "There's more. We tried introducing him to our other rehabilitation bobcats, but he's different. Too comfortable with humans to fully rewild, but not aggressive or demanding attention either. He's in this middle ground we sometimes see with human-raised wildlife." Daniel's heart sank. "So he can't be released?" "No, but that's not necessarily bad news. We've been approved for a new educational program, partnering with schools and libraries to teach kids about native wildlife. Scout's perfect for it, calm enough to not stress during presentations, but still clearly wild. He'd have a job, a purpose." She paused. "And Dan? We could use volunteers for the program. Someone Scout already trusts would make the transition easier." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, When can I visit? That Saturday, Daniel drove the 2 hours north through evergreen forests and winding mountain roads. The Cascade Wildlife Sanctuary sprawled across 50 acres of pristine wilderness, with enormous enclosures designed to mimic natural habitats. Rebecca met him at the visitor center and led him back to the rehabilitation area. Scout's enclosure was impressive. A quarter-acre of native vegetation, climbing structures, a heated den, and a pool for drinking and playing. Daniel could see him immediately, lounging on a high platform in a patch of sunlight, looking every inch the wild predator he was meant to be. "Scout," Daniel called softly. The bobcat's head snapped up, ears swiveling forward. For a moment, nothing. Then Scout bounded down from the platform in a series of impossible leaps, racing to the fence line. He pressed against it, purring so loudly Daniel could hear it from 10 feet away, rubbing his face against the chain link where Daniel's hand rested. "He remembers," Rebecca said unnecessarily. Daniel knelt, pressing his palm flat against the fence. Scout pushed his face against it, eyes closed in contentment. They stayed like that for a long moment, man and bobcat, separated by wire but connected by something deeper. "I'll volunteer," Daniel said, "for the education program. Weekends, whenever you need me." Rebecca smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Over the following months, Daniel became a regular at the sanctuary. He helped with Scout's training for the education program, teaching him to remain calm during presentations, to demonstrate natural behaviors on cue. Not tricks, Rebecca insisted, but natural hunting and climbing behaviors that helped children understand bobcat ecology. Their first presentation was at Cedar Ridge Elementary, Daniel's old school. Scout, secure in a specially designed presentation enclosure, watched with alert interest as Rebecca explained bobcat habitat and conservation. When she mentioned how Scout had been rescued, Daniel saw several children's eyes widen with recognition. The story had become something of a local legend. "Officer Morrison was the one who saved him," Rebecca said, and Daniel felt dozens of small faces turned toward him with something approaching awe. After the presentation, a little girl raised her hand. Why did Scout come to the police station? How did he know to ask for help? Rebecca looked at Daniel, letting him answer. "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. Maybe his mother had seen humans before and knew we weren't always dangerous. Maybe it was just instinct, finding shelter wherever he could. Or maybe he looked at Scout, who was watching him with those familiar green eyes. Maybe sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, exactly when someone needs us most. The program was a success. Scout became a regional celebrity of sorts, the bobcat who knocked on a police station door. His story helped raise thousands of dollars for the sanctuary and educated hundreds of children about wildlife conservation. Daniel volunteered every weekend, helping with presentations, maintaining enclosures, and simply spending time with Scout. A year passed. Scout grew into a magnificent adult bobcat, 35 pounds of muscle and grace. He could never be fully wild. He still approached the fence whenever he saw Daniel, still purred and play wrestled with enrichment toys rather than hunting live prey. But he was healthy, engaged, and serving a purpose that mattered. One evening, as Daniel sat outside Scout's enclosure finishing paperwork for the sanctuary, he thought about that night during the storm. He'd broken protocol, risked his career, acted on pure instinct rather than training. By every measure of professional conduct, he'd been wrong. But watching Scout, strong, healthy, and helping teach a new generation about protecting wildlife, Daniel knew he'd make the same choice again. Sometimes the heart knew things the head couldn't understand. Sometimes a knock at the door wasn't just a request for shelter from the storm, but an invitation to be part of something larger. Scout approached the fence and sat down, mirroring Daniel's position. They stayed like that as the sun set behind the Cascades, an old cop and a not-quite-wild bobcat. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected connections were the ones that mattered most.